Um, hang on 1 second and we can get started. I feel like I'm forgetting something.
What are you forgetting?
I don't know, dude, I'm forgetting it. All right, fuck it. I
By the way,
guess you go ahead, you got it.
so it's really funny is that, and I got this from my coach, by the way. Whenever we're kind of like swirling a little bit, and fuck it is our mantra, and it's usually the last 2 words I say to myself before I go into a fight or a public presentation. Just thought I'd share that. Like, fuck it. Fuck it. We're going. Fuck it. Like, just.
Maybe we should change the name of our podcast. Fuck it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of like
I think,
these 2-word get to the point mottos or life philosophies.
yeah. It's funny. It's gonna be interesting when like we do finally settle on a real, like, once we want to take it to the next level on the name, because then we won't have this conversation. It's always fun. It's like that joke that is like an inside joke. Hey, maybe that should be the next name of our podcast. Like, we can't make that joke anymore. It's because we'll already have a name. But anyway, so today is Wednesday, November 15th.
17th.
17th. It's I think it's getting cold now, properly cold here in the area that we're in. We are just over a week out from our IS ceremony, focus on integrating the changes, right, that we want to put into our lives. And I think we're just going to continue right off of the last topic, just almost like a check-in on where we're at, insights on what it's like going through it live. The last time that we spoke in that Airbnb and that was about as live as it gets. It's just a little bit less live.
Yeah, I think last time, I guess let me try to break it down, or like give the too long didn't watch, just so that we're on the same page, and then we can talk about where we are 1 week back into the integration. So last time we were talking about how when we tend to go on these spiritual retreats, it can be an Aya retreat, or it could be any type of retreat, meditation retreat, maybe even a long vacation, or maybe like, sometimes you unplug from life and you just like, go somewhere and take like a 2-week break to yourself, and then you come back and you feel like reset and refresh. The idea is you are like this individual piece of a system, and when you're in the system, like, it's hard to kind of like make any changes, because all the forces in the system pushes you towards a certain level of equilibrium that you're in, and that system is obviously, or not obviously, but it's your life, it's your work, it's your family, it's your relationships, it's all the stuff, your environment, that makes you within your system. But if you want to make a change once you're in the system, it's much harder to make that change, because the system has a certain level of gravity or inertia that pushes you towards a certain equilibrium. So in order to make that change within yourself, you as the individual piece in the system, you have to leave the system, so that all the forces that are acting upon you aren't there anymore. And then that oftentimes helps you create the space necessary to make the change within yourself, or at least realize the changes that you want to make in order to become a better person, I suppose. So you go off into wherever you go off to. Stephen and I went off to an Aya ceremony, and then we obviously during the ceremony there were a lot of realizations, a lot of deep insight, a lot of feelings that came up, stuff that made us very, very motivated to change, where we're like, oh my God, when we get back to the system that we were in, we want to instill these changes. However, so step one is leave the system. Step two is realize the changes that you want to make within yourself through whatever retreat or practice you're in. Step three, which is the integration step, is go back into the system, having realized these changes, and then actually trying to make lasting change. And that's actually the hardest part. So currently we're in step three. Last week we would define this problem. This week we're 1 week into the challenge of reintegration. That was a really too long didn't watch. So Stephen, if you could just take the mic from me, I'd appreciate it.
I thought that was perfect. I thought that was perfect. Really well said. Yeah, so I think what is most interesting that I wanted to share more just personally with you, Hack, and maybe we can jump off into other topics, is that I think I've been at this spot many times in my life already, right? Trying to invoke a change. And each time is a little bit better, hopefully, right? In terms of probably the most important factor in all of this in success, which is your presence and awareness throughout it all. And I think for the first time, I really feel myself being shaped back into the the forces being like, oh, like bumping me this way, and I'm like going back into the Steven like mold. One thing that stood out for me in particular, to use an example from yesterday at my Muay Thai gym, and I think that it's fair to say that, Hack, both of our downloads and insights were around being just better people all throughout, right? Like in every micro moment, right? Like no moment in your life is too small or insignificant for you to not bring your best forward, right? And that is unlocked by being a present human being, and acting in accordance with love, acting, with authenticity and an alignment. And I remember one interaction I had with a student yesterday that was like, it's funny because it was just a little bit sharper than I might have like expected from my new Aya self. But then the rationalization engine started to run off too, right? I was like, no, it's cool. Like that person needed to hear it that way, and like and the other people around, they probably need to hear that I told it to her that way. And I come from a coaching position, so there's an authority there. And like, but it's funny because regardless of right or wrong, regardless if this was in alignment with the image that I came out of Aya with, like I recognized a different awareness. Like I caught it immediately almost, right? Like I like whereas in the past, maybe I would have just like kept going. And I think the most important part to integration practices or anything change is that it doesn't mean that you don't do the thing that you did before, right? I think it's more like the primary measure that you should be you should be like calibrating on is, once that thing happens, because it will, what's the interval in which you've become aware of it, right? And the reconciliation to go back to where, quote unquote, your center, whatever that center is. And there was also a moment in my past week of integration where, two moments actually, where I actually lost my temper again. And it was just like, oh man, we're back here. We're back here. You just lost your temper. But as it was happening, I was so aware of what was happening. Like, you know, like the chariot, the horses were pulling me away, and I was like losing control of the reins. Like, and then immediate when the dust settled, I was like, boom, like something happened here. And I was curious if you could also share your insights into moments that maybe in the past week where you weren't, like you fell into maybe an older pattern, right? Or it was like something that you were trying to change, and maybe not, because that would be, yeah.
So okay, so one thing that I definitely noticed, and this is the word that I use, um, I think just now you just defined it as, when I guess like when something happens, like something that used to happens, and you're like going down the same path, you have a certain level of awareness that probably wasn't there 2 weeks ago. I use the word space. I think that when you're in the system for a long time, you become part of the system, and there's not even space between you and the system. You're like this individual entity of Stephen within your system, but almost like the boundaries of the system get lost. And then like when something happens, it's just, this um whole mechanism is part of the system, so it just reacts and does what it does. I suppose now coming back from this retreat, there's like a certain space where when something happens, it feels like there's a little bit more space to react. It's not perfect because of course we um myself personally, I mean, there's definitely been spots where I'm like, oh damn, I guess I'm still working on this here. um I've definitely fallen into certain patterns where I'm like, oh, here we go again. But there's also been moments where I've been more patient with myself and the people around me. I think specifically for me, and maybe this is because this is something I personally am working on. I think I've done a better job of being patient with the people around me, uh, and understanding their perspectives better. Um, I've probably done a poorer job of making the personal changes I want to make within myself when I'm like, like by myself, if that makes any sense. Like, for instance, I don't want to spend as much time on my cell phone, but somehow I always do. And it wasn't that way right when I got back. Right when I got back, I was like pretty on top of it. But then, it's almost like a coping mechanism. It's like when you're like, I guess, like stressed out from like the shit that you have to do, um, for I guess for your life responsibilities. Um, it's a coping mechanism. You're like, you know what? I'm just gonna stare at my phone for a little bit. This is like a small little escape. And so yeah, but I've found myself to have to allow a lot more space between space for like other people to be, if that makes any sense. Like I feel like I've grown a little bit in terms of patience for other people and their perspectives. Um yeah, I think one of the things, and maybe we said this in the podcast last week, one of the realizations that me and you both shared was that people are always trying their best. And as long as you can always remember that, it's a lot easier to be um patient with them, or at least even try to understand their perspective. So I think that little mantra has come a long way for me in this week. There's probably a couple others, but that was the one I resonated with a lot.
Yeah, so a couple of things. I love the idea of space. Um, and I think that really captures it succinctly. Uh, Again, the thing that's going to enable you to succeed, I think, in changing yourself, in changing your environment, changing your perspective. People are always trying their best, which there's a lot of rabbit holes there on free will and but we don't have to go there. You understand that. I think that in society, we over-index on personal choice, right? Someone does something wrong, quote unquote. What is wrong even? We say it's their fault, right? They have a choice in the matter. They could have done better. You know, why did they do that? And it's like, no, everyone is always as good as they are in that moment. One thing that was interesting to me is, I don't know how this is maybe specifically directly related, but I've been, even pre and post retreat, I've just been completely absorbed in Ram Dass's work. And as you know, and he's you know, spiritual guru type, back in the first like kind of psychedelic wave in the 70s and what have you. And what's interesting is, regardless of the amount of content I've gone through with him, 90% of it seems to focus exactly on this, on integration, right? I think he does such an amusing job of highlighting all the scenarios of which you feel, he uses the word high, right? It's like anytime you're doing something that you feel high, like if you quote unquote think it's like noble, it's like whatever, like, you know, I did yoga, come out of it feeling high. I did, you know, I read this, I did that, volunteer, all this stuff, but inevitably you always will drop to this lower level. So I mean, why is that? And I think one like practical technique he actually brought up a couple times is this idea of cultivating the witness. You know, creating that space and being detached, like, oh, look, Steven's getting angry again. Oh, isn't that interesting? Right? The witness, a reminder that the witness here is the you, you know, if I don't know, maybe the you, the deepest, truest you that exists, right? Like the you as a kid, the you that just is not Steven, you know, 32 years old, product designer, friend of hack, whatever. Like, it doesn't, none of that stuff matters. It's just like the witness behind it all. And I think, and one thing that he mentioned was, it is hard enough though to protect that space when it is just one witness and one object. And he suggests that you create a third party, and that you imagine, practically visualize a third entity. And he's like, it could be Jesus, it can be God, it can be whoever, it can be whatever it is that you want to make. That's your guru, that's your action, like that's your real guru that lives with you. It's a being made full of light. It's everything that represents, like, and that you and that other being are always witnessing the thing at the same time. And I don't know, I'm still trying to map out this inner structure, like this inner world, because I know that we've been using the word, we've been talking about our spirit a lot too, right? I don't know, spirit, witness, guru, like is it possible to make like a whole party of friends watching the thing that's happening live through these eyes, right? Like watching like you imagine, so I'm on a couch right now in front of a TV, by the way. Like, could you just like have like 3 or 4 of your friends watching the same show together? And does that do anything? I don't know. Anyway, bit of a side ramble, but.
So the witness is, to me, it's like the awareness behind it all. It's like who's watching the show. And there is like a presence or an awareness behind that. And that's the you. I think that's the deeper you that, you know, Ram Dass perhaps is referring to. I think Eckhart Tolle, maybe to me, that's the spirit, that awareness has always been there behind you. It's like a third party, perhaps. I don't know if that's what they're referring to, but that's what I've always thought of it as.
Real quick, because I don't think I did a good job of it. Could you try to re-explain exactly this spirit concept? because I think it's just such a, it goes back to our topic about awakening. Like, how do you explain that total awareness that exists?
I don't know how to explain that with
It's
words.
it's so hard. Yeah.
There's always there's like a quality of attention or a quality of consciousness that has always like kind of like been there, that never goes away. Um, that's always been there since you were like a little kid. Like whoever was like present when shit was going down when you were like 5 years old, 10 years old, 20, and like even currently now, as I'm sitting here talking to you, there's like a certain presence that's like witnessing the whole experience that is hacked. And it's almost like an awareness that's like um behind it all. I don't
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm really not gonna be able to explain it this morning with words.
No. But this is great, because this is why I love our talks. As messy as they can be, right, and tangential as they can be, like, it just helps frame it. And one thing that I've actually been using to help with the cultivating awareness, space, witness is, if you think about it, Alan Watts talks about this too, right? Whenever we conceptualize ourselves, we always think it's this like scrunchy tension that sits right here behind the eyes, right? Like, it's always here. And if you like want to think harder and reinforce your sense of self, just scrunch your forehead a little bit more. And so I think a lot of people can relate to this idea that there's a person that's sitting in the brain behind the eyes. And what I've been doing is I've been pretending that there's a person behind the head, watching the person behind the eyes, watching whatever is out there. And so that's been extremely helpful. So a lot of my visualizations now come from the back of my head. So
There's a when you use the word conceptualizing, uh I'm thinking that's why it's so hard to try to describe that, because the presence that we're both referring to, I think, has nothing to do with the mind. It's like outside of the mind. It's like behind it. It has absolutely nothing to do with the mind. The mind is something that it is witnessing, but it is not the mind at all. It is not like, the voice in your head. It's not that. But when you use the word conceptualizing, that's like that's literally the mind. The mind is the thing that conceptualizes. You even describing the word conceptualizing and me trying to understand what that means or what you're trying to say is the mind doing the conceptualizing. So because they're words and because it's like something that I'm trying to understand, it forces me into my mind to try to understand it, and that is the thing that makes it so that I won't be able to know what you're talking about. I don't I probably lost I mean there's only like 3 people that listen to this podcast, me, you, and Min, and I probably just lost her.
yeah.
She's probably like, what the no, but did I lose you?
No, you didn't lose me. And if you couldn't tell, like, I just got a shit-eating grin that got bigger and bigger because it's it's so funny. Right? There's nothing else. There's no other way for me to put it. Like, it's the paradox of it is so funny because I think it's a great example of trying so hard at something, and then once you figure out the actual answer, there's this like release of like, oh shit, like, what, I was completely on the wrong. There's no way out of it except to just break it. Like, it's a paradox. It's a literal paradox. There's no way out except like to dissolve the whole thing completely. So, and by the way, I'm really glad that we have this as a practice because this it's really hard to parse through this stuff.
Yeah, I don't even know if we're I mean I personally don't think I'm doing a great job of it. But it feels nice on my end to just like kind of, um, just spit some words out there and then see what sticks with you, and then having you volley some stuff back. And then it feels like we're making like inching along, our understanding of this. But yeah, I don't know if I'm doing a great job of it, but it for on my end, it feels nice to just be able to talk openly about it.
Yeah, for sure. So let's tie this back to integration, right? Like, um,
I have a question.
sure, go for it.
Is it possible to always sit in the witness? Is that a um is that an achievable goal? Is that something that people do? Like, are there people just walking? Is that what it means to be woke? People are just walking around always in their damn witness, like always in that presence. And then like, so when stuff happens in life, they're just always present in the now, and they're just like it's like the mind becomes a tool for the spirit, as opposed to the mind just um taking over the whole damn thing.
If I'm to take Ram Dass at his word, I would say yes. But it's really difficult and really rare, and I think only attainable by a few people in this world, right? Yeah, he spoke almost specifically on this, trying to find his own guru, Maharaji in India, who he felt met that. I think you could make an argument that Eckhart Tolle and Thich Nhat Hanh, I mean, these are the gargantuans in the spiritual like world. I would confidently put them in that space. But I think there's a lot of even still well-practiced, well-renowned spiritual masters that are still not like quite there. So it's really difficult. But and then again, there's some people, I'm thinking back to my life, that they might just be actually there, and this is going to sound very politically incorrect, but it's almost because they, I mean, they have like almost a positive and beneficent ignorance about the way they live their life, like they're not overthinkers. Like, I don't need to know all of that. They just live, right? And there's a wisdom in that, I think. One could argue that they are mostly just witness, or maybe just the mind in that scenario is like smaller and less powerful, less rabid. It's not necessarily that the witness is stronger. I don't know if the witness is even something that gets stronger or weaker, right? The witness just is, but the mind can be something that is modulated. I know that certainly at times, sometimes my mind is uncontrollable, and then sometimes it's a lot more tame, a lot easier. Like, and there's something also be said about environment about that. I've been thinking a lot about too. A lot of ascetics, a lot of monks, and what have you, they take on certain practices in order to reach a deeper level of spiritual awareness and also maintain that, right? Like, they shave their head because, look, despite your best efforts and defenses against the ego, every time you look in the mirror and you have to like fix your hair or whatever, and it's there, like it's gonna be a thing, an attachment, right? An anchor. And so there's probably something you said about like how the environments and the play that we engage in right now in this world is probably extremely counterproductive to cultivating a total awareness. It like requires ego to be reinforced at so many junctures. And so maybe like we're just like set up to lose, right? Like the odds are heavily against us. So yeah, I don't know. I know you asked the question, but I'm also curious on what you think. Like, do you think it's possible? Do you think there are people doing that, and what have you?
I wonder if there's people. It was interesting to me when you brought that up. How you name like the, I guess like the gurus. Like Eckhart Tolle, Ram Dass, like those guys. I wonder if there's like people that are just like woke like them, like you're saying. And I think you're saying some people are woke like them, or not like woke like them, but like they're more woke because their mind is just naturally um like a few decibels lower. So they're just like not thinking all the time. Um I wonder if there's some people that are just like super present and aware all the time, but because they don't give a shit about ego, we don't know about them. They just go on living their life just fully present and just, doing their thing, going to work, going home to their family, just like, regular ass people, but they're just always present all the time. Um, and that's just cool. Um, I'm guessing there probably are uh people that are like that. It's also interesting to me when you talk about like the spectrum of like how powerful one's mind is. Um, because there are some people that are very high level with their mind, and like, and they can, when I say high level, I mean that in sometimes both a good and a bad way. Like a good way in the sense that like they can articulate things because they have to, like their mind has to be able to see it with words and describe it. It's like almost like in order to be that absorbed into your, I don't want to say ego or mind, but like you have to have like a certain level of ability to articulate in order to be that high level. If you want to get into an argument with one of these guys and they're super high level, they can like, paint a really nice picture with words. And so it's always super interesting to me to see people that are just like super high level with that. But it's really cool to see like high level with like articulation, but then also like really woke, and then you like mash them together, and then you have like a dude like Eckhart Tolle or Alan Watts, or whoever, these guys that we kind of like look up to, and they're still using the mind, but they're like super present while using the mind to describe something that by definition cannot be described with words. You know what I mean? Like I don't think that's something that can be described with words, but it's not going to stop them from trying. And a lot of times, sometimes like, they get to a point where using the words that they are using to try to describe this quality of presence or attention or mind or whatever you want to call it, or the witness, it actually forces you to understand that, wait, it's not the words. So if it's not the words, what is it? And then that's like when you actually make some progress within yourself to finding that quality of witness. Yeah, I'm done talking. I don't know where I was going.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think it relates to what we're talking about with integration. It's just like it's mastery of paradox, right? Um, and I think I'm equally amused and intrigued by what you just said about how these guys are, they're they're going into a losing battle. They know it, and they kind of start their lectures saying that, like, hey, I'm going to go into the world of constructs because that's how you want to listen to it. You obviously, you paid ticket to come here and listen to me talk, and we're from the West, right? I think that unfortunately, if you want to help more people understand these things, you have to be able to put it into words. Like, we are fully in the world of words. I would argue that maybe in past societies and cultures, we kind of learn these things just by observing nature. like we talked about this in one of our earlier pods. Imagine if the environment you lived, every time you walked out, you saw the stars, right? Like every single night you walked out, you saw stars. And then you to the point where you noticed that they changed. Like you're like, oh, the stars changed. Or, you know, you walk out and our friend Amy showed that video of like a hawk preying on a raven, like, and you saw like an animal die off to the side, right? And you watched someone in your village pass away, and you watched like agriculture being grown. I think a lot of these things kind of come into you naturally through osmosis by being immersed in nature. But because we're so far removed now, like our teachings have to come through words. And I think it's an interesting experiment to try to see how that can be done. And I think there's been a few people who have succeeded in it. So yeah, and it's, I love watching these guys talk because it's almost as if like we all acknowledge that current modern society and the world of mind is just filled with bear traps everywhere. Like you take a step and you're like, this trap is gonna like snag you in the foot. And then yet these guys are like dancing around them all, right? And it's like, how are you doing that? Because it is quite interesting.
That's intriguing. Let's pull this down to the ground a little bit because
Yeah.
because I want to be able to practice this in my life too. So knowing that
So
there's
what?
bear traps and shit, and bear traps for the ego is what I'm assuming that you're saying. What are some practices that force you into, I don't know if forced to, right? I mean, there's definitely practices that force you out of the mind into the present moment and forcing you out of that world of constructs and forcing sounds so fucking uh like it's like a certain level of coercion that you're like, all right, mine. We're like almost like you're like in this fight, and I don't know if that's the best way to, I mean, my language betrays my intention here, but is there, what are the
Facilitate,
practices, yeah,
maybe
what are the
facilitate.
practices that encourage that quality of presence, that balance out the mind and the spirit, to pull it to more of an even playing field? And I would argue perhaps that it would be better that it was not just even, but the spirit is like a little bit, um you know, the
Yeah.
spirit is where you should be sitting and the mind should be below that. What practices help with that? What things help with that? Is it like if you're able to achieve like a flow state, is that when you're in your spirit? um you know, like is it like meditation when you're like sitting there watching the mind? It's like you're kind of trying to pull yourself back there. Is it, I mean, for you, Muay Thai perhaps? um is it uh doing acid every once in a while? What is it?
All of the above. All of the above. Uh,
let
and
let's
it's
let
funny because
let's work our way from daily to weekly to monthly and possibly yearly practices. So we start with like little smaller thing,
well,
or
I know the
perhaps,
smallest thing, right? Like yes, we should arrange these into a gradient because you know some of them are harder to access than others. But I mean, my boy Wim Hof has access to the most simple one. Like dunk yourself in a fucking vat of cold ass water. Like your mind will be gone. I think I think maybe described another way, it's just anything that dissolves your sense of self, right? So the two easiest ones for me are cold water, right, or some type of what is the word? Eustress. I don't know if you heard that term. EUSTRESS. It's not just stress, but positive stress, essentially, right? Positive, something that just kind of just shocks you in a positive direction but dissolves yourself because there's just nothing else that can take your attention other than that. And the second one I would do say that was easily accessible is Um, the sense of awe, right? AWE is one that's really powerful for invoking, I think, dissolution of self and awareness. However you can get it. Sometimes it can be by watching maybe an athletic or an artistic performance that you're just like, oh my God, how did they do that? Like, you know, wow, like you're just fully immersed, like captivated by what's happening with this that's happening in front of you. Or, you know, hopefully there's some type of nature around you, and it's going to depend on each person that can invoke this awe. Like I'm really easy. Like if I see a really nice sunset, or even right now it's a beautiful fall in the DC area. So if I see a tree that's just like a beautiful red or yellow, I'm like, oh my God, like I like literally that moment, I'm just like, there's no self, all right? But for some people, maybe they have to see the Grand Canyon, like the Grand. But I wonder if there's a person in this world where you could show them the Grand Canyon, or you could show them like something, and they'd be like, "Oh, that's cool," like So that wouldn't work maybe for that person, but
There's definitely some people that are like, oh yeah, that's cool. I
yeah,
could have saw
there's a
this.
big hole in the ground.
I could have saw this from my cell phone, bro.
Yeah.
Um,
So it depends. Yeah, it depends on the person, but
um, you said like cultivate the sense of no self.
no self. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I kind of want to ask you what that means, but at the same time, I understand that that's what we've been talking about this whole time.
This whole time. Yeah.
You know, like the Buddha, like I don't know. I literally know like possibly a too long didn't read or didn't even watch or read situation here. But I feel like someone told me a story about how the Buddha gave like this maybe like it was supposed to be like a lecture or a talk or something like that on like no self, and he got like all these monks like came around him, and then he just like, held up like a flower, like a lotus, and he
Mm-hmm.
just didn't say shit. He just held it up there, and he just stood there holding it, and everyone was like, you know, what the fuck's the guy doing? And he just held it for, I might be making this up, and he just held it out there, and then I think eventually like one of the monks understood what he was trying to, and I guess he didn't say anything, so what he was trying to portray, and it was that like the present like moment is like, you know, like look at this flower, not anything he can say to evoke that, but it's almost like you have to um you have to like be present and see what the moment is, like enjoy the flower rather than, you know, I guess like a speech about what it is to be present. It's like, hey, look, like this is it. But I mean, how do you, I kind of want to get an ice bath now that you mentioned the Wim Hof thing. That definitely puts you in the present moment because you're not thinking about
Yeah.
thinking about shit.
Yeah, you have no choice. That one, I think you're talking about the word force. That one forces you. That one
Yeah,
forces you.
is there a
So here's another metaphor I actually think about on the force thing. Like imagine that there's pilot and co-pilot in a plane, right? And I think that when ego is in the pilot seat, you got to kick that guy out. You know, you're in the co-pilot seat, the real you, the spirit, and it's like, yo, dude, get out. And so then the ego should be in the co-pilot seat. Ego is a great co-pilot, amazing co-pilot. Just not a good, shouldn't be flying the plane. No, he's like too erratic and too emotional about no self. Sorry, I interrupted, but
no,
you
you're
were
good.
first.
No, you're good. My bad. My internet's like it says it's unstable, so I think I was in and out of. Go ahead, you can finish.
Okay, cool. I was gonna say one more thing that came to mind in terms of cultivating no self, or an example of it that we see in the real world is, I think that parents' relationship to their children is a really good example of this. I think for a majority of people, like the birth of their child is deep by hands down the most significant moment of no self they've ever experienced in their life, right? It's also chemically induced. Like I would say it's drug induced. Like your neurotransmitters are going fucking crazy, right? As soon as like you see your newborn. And I think through the period in which they are just the most innocent babies, I think for most people, I would say like they are fully humble parents. Like they see their kid as like, wow, this is me. If that hurts, I hurt, right? If I hurt, that hurts. Like we are connected. There's no like me and that, like we are one. Now, the best parents, I think, can keep that forever, right? I think some of the other parents, they might fall into the trap of ego where the kid starts to have their own personality, ego identity. And then you start to think about like, oh, this is my kid. I pay for it. Like, and then you might lose that sense. And it's like of no self in relation to your kid. But there are certainly parents I know who have been able to maintain this concept that we're orbiting around of no self with their child. And that's what I was thinking of when you were kind of talking about it, like something I think we observe in parents.
Okay, I have a couple of ideas.
Yeah.
I'm gonna forget. I already forgot like 3 of them probably. I'm gonna state
Go,
this
go,
one
go.
before I forget this one. How do we? Okay, first of all, it was really interesting to me because it's the first time that I realized that I used the word force the ego, almost like fighting against the ego, almost like and there's a quality of resistance there that I feel like I need to understand better, because perhaps resistance is the thing that makes it stay, the thing that makes it harder, the thing that the ego kind of like lives off of. So there's that, because a lot of times it's like letting go of the ego as opposed to like, hey man, so if you want to fight, let's fight. So that's one thing. Second thing, fuck, I keep thinking of using the word force, but I'm trying to make myself not. So
So
allowing,
hold on. I fall in this trap all the time, right? If you were giving a seminar lecture right now, I think you are right to try not to use the word force. But I'm totally like rocking what you're saying when you're talking about force. Like,
yeah,
just
no,
go with it.
yeah,
Just
okay,
go with
so
it. Yeah, yeah.
all right, so how do you, is there a way, because you know how we're talking about how do we force the ego, um force ourselves into the present moment throughout our day, you know, like cold showers and going into nature and stuff like that. Is there a way to gift that quality of presence to other people throughout our day? Like, is there a way to induce that in other people? I do know like a lot of times like people are on like, I guess, autopilot, and I think autopilot is the ego just, you know, reacting based on the storylines that are very automatic. um but like, how do you pull people out of autopilot in their day? What are some things that you could do? um is that a gift you can give somebody? I mean, is it a gift? I mean, do people want to be out of their ego? I assume yes. But how do you do that? I mean, there's certain people, if you think about, there's certain people that are good at that, where when you see them, you're like, oh, like, you're like engaged with that person. But then there's other people where it's more like, oh, they're just um, like a background character in your life. You know what I mean? Like when things just become like A equals B, so B equals C, C equals D, and the egos are just talking to each other. How do you get out of that dichotomy that's so natural?
Do you have an answer to that, or is it just
No,
a question?
absolutely not.
I mean, I think I do have a working answer to that, which is to use a Western term, active listening, right? Not, and remember, I think it's very interesting that it's called active listening and not passive listening. Listening, I think a lot of people think listening is a passive activity, that you're not actually doing anything. So like, why bother, right? Like I'm not actually, I've come to this conversation to do work. But active listening, for anyone who's tried it, is hard as fuck and a ton of work. And I think that in a world where we are not really listening to each other, sometimes even when we think we are listening, a lot of people develop an ego around being good listeners, are not actually being good listeners. So however you conceptualize that, I think if you can be a really good listener, and when you are blessed with the presence of another person, and I use that too, you should feel that. You should feel that you are blessed with their presence. They should feel that you feel that. Like, wow, isn't this great that you are here and I am here, right? Like, that's crazy. What are you doing? How are you doing? Like, and if you can, I think if you can cultivate a real, authentic interest in that, recognizing that this other person is just a spirit like you, cut from the same source, that you can give another person that awareness. And, I think that a really good demographic to practice this on is actually teenagers. I think teenagers are in this really weird state of identity formation, really in relationship with the world, in which they are ripe for someone to actually listen to them, right? Because they're not adults, but they are adults, and they definitely feel like they're adults. And they can't actually put things into words either. A lot of if you actually talk to them, they're just like, I don't. And then, if you can help complete those words to them by listening to them, like you see them open up before your eyes, right? You're like, they're like they actually be like the lotus. They start to bloom once you give them that. So yeah, my short answer would be just achieving a level of mastery in active listening and presence, which is tough for someone like me, because I do, talking to somebody, you're free associating, and you want to give them like the idea that they prompted in you, but there's no you, it's just them, right? You are serving as the awareness around them.
I like that. Remembering to be active in our listening. It's probably not natural. Because I always have some shit to say. So it's like being loaded into my head as you're talking. I'm like, and not even necessarily like a rebuttal, but kind of even trying to add to the conversation. It's a very natural thing. It's like our I think even like this podcast is kind of to cultivate that. It's like we're almost like building something together. So every time you go into, let's say, a paragraph about something, in my head I'm like, all right, what's the next paragraph? Where does this topic go? And I'm not doing that on purpose. It's just a natural mechanism of my mind, and I think a natural mechanism of your mind too. And that's why I think that's one of the reasons we have this podcast, to see how those two mechanisms like almost like interact. Like I say this thing and it unlocks this other thing in your head, and then we together build out our ideas between the two minds. So is active listening when we're able to turn that off, or is off not or be more aware of that mechanism, or how do you actively listen? Like does it involve turning off your mind?
No, I don't think it's involved. It doesn't involve turning off your mind. Not completely, or I mean, there's not even maybe a word for it. Like it's a different thing altogether. right? It's a different type of cognition. Like when you do public speaking, right? Are you thinking about every next word? No, right? But are you thinking? Yes, right? When people are freestyle rapping, or people always ask me this when I fight, right? Are you thinking in there? Are you like trying to figure out your next? I'm like, I'm not thinking, but I'm still thinking. Like I'm still saying like, oh, I better do this, but it's not like verbal thought, right? And so I think that, call it flow state, well, whatever. I think there's no self doesn't mean like no mind, right? It doesn't mean passivity. There's still things happening. But it's just a different mechanism and different cognition altogether, different type of cognition. It's more intuitive, right? It's intuitive style thought. Yeah. So, sorry, I'm gonna talk about a little bit of what had queued up in my mind when you're talking, but it's a topic I'm super passionate about, and why I think this podcast is really interesting experiment for us, because I think that there's a minimum level of third-party observer that you can introduce to everything that adds value to what it is that you're doing. I know we've had so many conversations in tech, right? But then we were like, okay, what if we recorded it and posted it somewhere? We have what? It's you, me, and Min that watch this, right? And we've kind of told some people, but still, that small increment of change changes the way I talk to you. It changes the way, like, I mean, I promise you, if this camera wasn't on, I'd be interrupting you so much more probably. And we would be diverging so much more, right? Like my behavior is changed so much just by the introduction of this camera lens and this microphone. And I think there's something there too about artificial, maybe artificial is not the right word, but like, yeah, creating some type of observer, third-party observer, even if you have to use your imagination to do it, or you put a camera around you or whatever. Or I think almost in a sense where, in this, going back to this active listening thing, you try to be that camera for the other person, where a camera doesn't do shit, right? It just records and mirrors and can replay and what have you. But what a tool, right? What an amazing thing for us to have in order to learn more about ourselves, and to like to facilitate performances. Like this is what we're doing here is nothing short of a performance, really, right? Between two people trying to like dance around one theme. So super interesting stuff.
Being present's hard. It just goes against the nature of I wonder if it was always hard. Like I think it's hard now, but like, was it always hard? Like, was it like 500 years ago where people were like, oh my God, my mind is racing all day?
You got to pick a bigger number than that, because if we're looking back at Buddhism, all the old stuff, Stoicism, philosophy, all the ancient philosophies, like 500, beyond 500 BC. So over 2,500 years ago, right?
So it was always hard.
I think it was always hard. And because like, even if you think about the natural world, right? You have a small amount of daylight to do everything that you need to do. Like, you know how much wood you have to have before like night hits and all that, before winter hits? Like you need, I think like we are by nature future oriented and needing more, like more, next thing, more, oh my God, more. What's the next thing I gotta do? Next thing I gotta do. And I think in the natural, people always romanticize like homestead living and being in nature. But that shit is tough. And there's a million things to do. There's more things to do than we have to do now, right? The benefit though of those things, that it's things you can see and touch, right, and hold. And so there's the physical aspect that makes it a lot better. But yeah, I think people have always been like this, man. Yeah, I think it is hardwired into our genes, our DNA. It's what makes us human. It's what, like flowers flower, right? Fish swim, whatever. Humans overthink. That's birds fly, humans overthink.
Hmm. Humans do have to think. I mean, that is what makes us human. But there's probably a certain degree of thinking that's like not overthinking. You know, when you talk about the quality of attention, there's like in a fight, you're still thinking, but you're not like thinking like all the, you know, like let's say it's a spectrum of fuck, I
Or
hate,
when you're quarterbacking, right? I don't want to use too many fight metaphors. Yeah, like
yeah, I'm like still thinking. I'm not like, you know, just um we can talk about thinking too, but that will get a little meta. um I wonder if I want to diverge. I had an interesting thought here.
do it.
So I saw this. It's not interesting. It's literally just I'm going to share a fact that I thought was interesting. But
Yeah.
I saw a Twitter post about this guy that used to be so he became deaf. So there was a point in his life where he, like, you know, could hear and stuff like that. And I think he was like, very rough estimate, I could probably dig up the Twitter post if we needed, but um I think he was like in his 30s, and I think he lost his hearing like 10 years prior. And he realized, I guess 10 years into it, that the way that he was thinking was, rather than with words and stuff, because he stopped hearing words, was with like sign language. Like anytime he was thinking of like a thought, it'd be like a visual, like whatever sign language cue, as opposed to like, you know how when we think it's just words, it's language, it's uh yeah, it's words, it's language, it's the stuff that comes out of our mouth, it's the stuff when we read, it's the things we write, and those are the um I suppose that is the raw material of our thoughts. And with that's why language is so powerful. That's why earlier when I was like, yo, I'm using the word forced here, sounds so damn bad, but if I don't have a better word, then that's what it's going to be. You know, if I don't have like eggs to bake this cake, then I'll probably just have to use something else, and the cake might not come out in the manner by which I want it to. So yeah, it was just super interesting to me. I was like, wait, people can think without words. And if that's the case, then what is that? I don't know if there's anything practical there, but it was, it feels like there is, but it was just something I never considered before.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems so obvious, but if your language is, yeah, I mean, I don't know, go ahead. I'm just rambling at this point, but
Well, I just want to share a fun facts too off of that. You're right, is a super juicy topic, but um, I I think in high school I actually was wondering about this same topic, and I found out that I was talking to my sister about it, and she told me that her friend, she's Korean American, does everything in English, but when she does math, she does it in Korean in her mind. And when I asked my parents, maybe you can ask your parents this too. My dad has been in America for quite a bit of time. I asked him what his inner voice is, and he says it's English. It's in English. And I asked my mom, hers is in Vietnamese. And I'm like, these two people are married to each other. They're both like outwardly Vietnamese, but one speaks English to himself in his head, and one speaks Vietnamese to herself in her head. And like, we're not really thinking about that, right? Like, I wonder, I actually even told my parents that I wonder what it's like, what if anything would change, if like my parents, they're husband and wife, they fight a lot. if they knew that like there was such a difference, and how many more differences could there be, right? Infinite possible permutations of your metacognition. So yeah, it's crazy to not think in words though. Class closing bit, there's all those studies, I think linguistic studies on, and psychological studies on happiness too. And they, they analyze societies that had like maybe like 1,000 ways of saying, or 100 ways of saying happy, right? Describing happiness. Like, oh, what's the happiness when your child is born versus the happiness when you got promoted versus the happiness that you're eating like, a really good hamburger, versus like tribes where there's like 3 types of happiness and that's it. You're one of the 3, like, certainly makes it easier, right? But I think language can be interesting in that way too, in terms of the fidelity or the resolution that you have. Yeah, you can key into.
That is interesting. Does that mean that,
Who's happier?
well, like Eskimos have like, like 24 words for snow, every different quality and type of snow. So they know like they can tune into more of these. Nowadays, it feels like we're tuning into more, like we have more words for, we talk a lot about like anxiety, depression, and nervousness and feeling stress, feeling like we have a lot of words for like these negative emotions. But does that mean that if we cultivate more words for positive emotions and we're able to kind of like Eskimos with snow, but with positive emotions, like able to color our, not necessarily color, but if we're able to see more positive emotions and have a higher degree of fidelity between like happiness and exuberance and I'm bad at this, so but if we had like the source in our heads and we're aware of these words and we're aware of our language, how much would that change our experience, if at all? I think the hypothesis here for me is that it would change our experience significantly, just because like for me, I'm like snow, but to an Eskimo, they could use a word and it means, oh, snow that looks like it's been there for like 3 days and it's slowly melting, and you're just like, how do you even see that depth of experience there? And perhaps we can point that inward to our internal experience and have better experiences because of that. Yeah, that's it. And
Yeah.
I had a fleeting thought about that guy we met at the ayahuasca retreat, Eric.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how he was so like gifted with language, and he was just like, hey, listen, like I wish I had some of his examples because those are literally.
He said he said he'd send us a Google, or I want to reach out to him and ask again. He said he has it written down on a Google Doc, so we will bring that back, I think. So I want to acknowledge that we have completely left Eastern spiritual thinking at this point by talking about language. It's all of it is about non-dualism, right? The fundamental construct, fundamental premise being separation is what causes separation. And on the Western side, we are trying to separate more and more. We're trying to like atomize things, as we're trying to get to the smallest possible thing of everything and distinguish it and classify and categorize, like obsessively, right? Taxonomize, whatever. And so I think that your Buddha is not gonna, that does not make us happier. Oneness is what brings us like peace and fulfillment. So I would offer up that answer. But I do see like, it's not like we can totally relinquish what it means to pursue knowledge, right? And be human. and learn, explore, and more of quote unquote truth in the universe. I think the thing is that, just like anything else, it's a gift and a curse, right? With great power comes great responsibility. Like the upside is really high, but the downside is also equally really high. And not everyone who holds that tool or weapon is going to get the same benefits out of it, right? They might get some more of the negatives. Smartphone is a great example, right? There's a huge debate in the minimalism community, by the way. I'm a big part of the minimalism community, just trying to, have intentional ethical consumption, trying to reduce waste, like trying to only fill your life with things that bring you value, right? And being very intentional. Like, is it really important that I get like the latest, MacBook? Is that, is it really important? I'm going to really scrutinize that. Now, a lot of people debate over the smartphone, because the smartphone, like, one, it's just this source of so much pain and anguish, right? But then it fits the true definition of minimalism more than anything. It has everything in it, right? You don't, like, it has my alarm clock, it's a computer, it has video. I don't need a TV anymore. I don't need a scanner. I don't need anything. I don't need a video recorder. I don't need a microphone. It's literally everything. And yet it's so good, but it's also so hurtful. And I think language, as it gets more powerful, is probably like a smartphone, right? With better language, you and I can access a finer degree of truth. Maybe we can use that to maybe come up with new solutions for the world, right? Sequence the human genome, develop new vaccines, right? Write poetry and art. But we can also get lost in the sauce, right? It's like, in the world of comparison. Oh man, if these words exist, that means that you could like loosely arrange them into a hierarchy of positive and negative. But what is positive and negative really? You can say like, oh man, Hack is smarter than me. Like, oh, he's more, Joe is more empathetic than me. And it's like, oh, you're just constantly judging,
Yeah, words by nature is the domain of the mind. So I guess having 20 words makes you better at mind stuff. and I don't know if that's a bad thing. Perhaps it is, but could be a good thing too. But I mean, literally the name of our podcast should be I don't know, but so
I don't know, but
yes.
I would throw back out there what I kind of just said is like, it just depends on the person, right? It just depends on the person.
Yeah, one of the I'm not trying to diverge anymore, but one of the deeper realizations I had on this last retreat was that I could be a lot more intentional with my words. Words never really affected me as much as they affected other people. So I've always been thinking, okay, well, if words affect me, that's my fault, because I have pretty solid control on what words affect me and don't affect me. So that also should imply that other people, if I say something and it affects them, it's their fault. But of course, we know people are trying their best. And words affect people differently, to different degrees based on many things. So being intentional with your words, then it could have a very deep effect on some people, and even if it doesn't have an effect on others. So maybe that's one piece of practical advice for myself.
That's a good one. No. That's not a tangent at all. I think that ties it back to integration. It ties it back to everything that we've been talking about. Very practical. I think you were the one in our IS ceremony that said words are spells. And it's funny because like, Eric had actually overheard that in a conversation with me. He was like, Who was it saying? Were you the one that said that? I overheard someone said words or spells, and then he went on to his like word tirade. I was like, yo, yeah, I think Hack said that. Like that wasn't me. That was the other Asian guy, not me. Yeah, he was like, was it you? I was like, no, no, it's Hack. But yeah, probably the best way to integrate. I mean, what's interesting is that like again, mind body paradox change thing. Like sometimes you have this leads and then this leads, and they kind of inform each other. And I think leading with your words is a really effective way to go forward and manifest, right? Being intentional with your words, you become that, or the world becomes what you say. And I think you're spot on. Like we, even even if you walk by somebody and you just give them 5 words, those matter, right? Like not so much in that you should become neurotic and worry, overthink what you say, because I think a lot of people suffer from social anxiety and trying to pick their words, but still a lot of people are also too careless and loose with their words, and not as empathetic probably.
Isn't that crazy that you could just like make someone's day with like 5 words? Like if I was like, yo, Steven, go try to make someone's day with 5 words as your task for today. And it probably wouldn't even take you that much effort to think about it. You probably just be like, okay, maybe think about it for like 5 minutes and come up with some loose strategy. Oh, the first time I see somebody today where I like their shirt or their shoes, I'm just gonna fucking tell them. And something, and you commit to that. And then so naturally you're looking for more instances where you can like, make someone's day with like a quick compliment or something. Or even like, oh, I haven't texted this person in a long time. I'm just gonna text them 5 words that I was thinking about them, and I thought it was funny because so and so. First time something reminds me of one of my friends I haven't texted, boom, just shoot them this little text, and then even if it doesn't make their day, but it makes them feel good in that moment they receive those 5 words. It's like you're going around casting like these little spells on people, you don't even know it.
Yeah, dude, 100%. It's funny at the ceremony too. I was talking to Chris about remembering people's names, right? Like that was something that I've fallen off of, but there was a period in my life where I wanted to have 100% accuracy in remembering someone's name on the first go. Like I was like, if you remember like everyone forgets everyone's name and it just accepts that, like, oh, I'm just bad with names. Oh, it's okay, I know you're bad with names. Everyone's bad at names. I was like, is it true though? Is that just like a self-imposed limit? And it is, because you can totally if you wanted to, you could remember everyone's name right away. You could. And it would make them feel so good, and everyone would be like dumbfounded about how you have this ability to remember everyone's names. And it's funny because like I was listening to an NPR thing at the time, and this was like almost like maybe 8 years ago at this point, about this guy who was a normal regular schmo like us, and then he ended up becoming like the world memory champion, like of all time, like just amazing level of memory, right? And developed all these like mnemonics and mental hacks to like remember more. And it's funny because I was telling Chris about this, because Chris is also a guy who's like, oh yeah, let's question the impossible and our limits and stuff. And he was like, oh yeah, I know, but I heard about that guy. Yeah, it's really cool. And then Todd, another retreat member, and this is crazy, Hack. This is like, he overheard us and he's like, oh yeah, that guy's in my mastermind group. And I was like, what the heck? Like, but anyway, my point is, all of that is to say that 100%, there's all these little small things we can do to show up a little better, right? To show up a little more, that have just a profound impact on the people around us. And it can be just as simple as remembering someone's name, or even those 5 words, right? If I had to package it up, it's things that reaffirm them, right? Hopefully in a way that they want to be seen and known, and being like, the aspects of identity that are great. Like I'm not going to go around being like, I mean, I don't know. Like compliments are interesting in that sense. Like, there's bad compliments, perhaps good compliments. I don't know. But reaffirming them, like, oh, I like that shirt that you're wearing, man. Like, I can tell that you put a lot of thought into that. Or, hey, Joe, what's up? Like, oh yeah, you're Joe, right? Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm Joe. How did you remember I was Joe? you know? Yeah.
Yeah, names are interesting. It's like the
Ultimate identity.
it's like the first part of the spell that you're casting.
Yeah.
It's like if you
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
know
yeah.
if you don't know the person's name, the level of spell you can cast has dropped significantly. You can't call upon like like when they're calling upon the um like at the ceremony when they're calling Ikaro songs and they know the names of the plants and stuff. Imagine you didn't know the names of the. I don't. All right, I'm diverging. Super. These just random stupid thoughts I had,
Uh, yeah.
but yeah. So let's cast some spells on some people. That'll be fun.
Casting spells, man. Yeah, that's I think that's a great note to end on. Casting spells on people.
I guess you can cast spells through text message too,
Yeah. Yeah, you
but
totally can.
it's much more powerful in person. I think.
So I've been casting spells by like how we text all the time now. Like if I'm outside your door, I text you like, yo, I'm here. Or like if I want to call you, I'm like, I text you, yo, do you free? And then I call you. But like now what I've been doing is that you just call people straight up. Like maybe if you're in a car and you got some downtime, like you just straight up call people. Like that's been an interesting one. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden there's a voice. Oh, what the hell? Accept. What's wrong? Is there an emergency? Oh no, I'm just calling to see how you're doing, man. I had like some.
When did it become like shit? I'm diverging again. But when did it become like when did the line cross between okay, calling somebody is past a certain point, a text message is a standard? Because it used to not be like that. There was definitely a point when calling somebody, I just call you. Was it like 10 years ago or something like that? Like there was but then now like who the hell starts with the call? You know
Yeah,
what I'm trying to say, right? Like I mean, it's been so long, so embedded at this point that it's not, you don't start with the call anymore. But there used to be a time when that was okay, I think.
yeah.
I guess I'm showing my age. All right, let's wrap before more ideas pop into my head or your head.
Sounds good. Yeah, that's right.
All right. Let me stop recording.